President Trump also made a pretty stunning revelation about a Republican member of Congress, one who Speaker Mike Johnson talked about and responded to quickly.
We had one man who was very ill. It looked like he wasn't going to make it. I don't know. I won't mention his name. Should I? Do other people know his name?
Congressman Neil Dunn of Florida had some real health challenges, and it was very serious, and had a pretty grim diagnosis. And I mentioned it to the president, and I said, Congressman Dunn is a real champion and a patriot because he's still coming to work. And if others got this diagnosis, they would be apt to go home and retire. And
what was the diagnosis?
It was, I think it was a terminal diagnosis.
He would be dead by June.
Okay, that wasn't public, but yeah, okay. That's it was grim. That's what I was going to say. I don't think
with a heart problem, by the way. This was a heart problem.
Right. The man has a new lease on life. He acts like he's 30 years younger, and he walked into the conference meeting, and we thought we'd seen a ghost. And I spoke with him over the weekend, and he's encouraged and thankful, and he thanks the president for his leadership and intervention.
He called to say that he was terminal, really bad heart. There's nothing they can do. I said, that's bad. Number one, it was bad because I liked him. Number two, it was bad because I needed his vote. But he really said, Mike, I'm going to last this out for the president and you.
Donald Trump also said that he did help get that Republican congressman with a terminal diagnosis medical treatment at Walter Reed. Joining us now is MS Now's Laura Barone Lopez from Washington, D.C. Jake Sherman is co-founder of Punchbowl News and an MS Now political contributor. Stuart Stevens, senior advisor at the Lincoln Project and chief strategist for Mitt Romney's 2012 campaign. Laura, what more do we know about this situation with the congressman?
Well, right now, we essentially just know what the president and Speaker Johnson were laying out there. It seems to be unclear whether or not this the congressman has been cleared of this diagnosis or not, or whether or not he is in remission with this diagnosis. But again, it's just stunning that the president, we've seen him do this before, not necessarily with someone's private medical history, but where he will say things out loud that someone has told him that was intended to be private. And it was stunning that in the middle of him talking about Iran and the state of the war, that he decided to essentially out the medical diagnosis of this lawmaker. And again, another thing that is telling about the president is a lot of this tends to go back to transaction for the president, where he said that, of course, he wanted the congressman to be healthy, but also that he needed his vote because there are tight margins in Congress right now, Chris.
To say the least, Jake, there are tight margins. Also, you saw kind of the look on the face of the Speaker of the House, who was not expecting the president to make public as much as he did. But are you familiar, or how familiar are you with this situation and more broadly what it does mean for Speaker Johnson and what's happening in the House?
Yeah, I'm very familiar with the situation. We reported last week or the week before, I've lost count, I've lost track, that the speaker said at a Republican fundraiser in Florida that Dunn had a terminal diagnosis. And we were told by the leadership months ago, within the last 2 months, that he would not be in Congress anymore, would be gone by July. There were some murmurs that he would not make it until July. That's not something that, we reported, because it's not. This is a man's life we're talking about. This isn't, a carton of milk expiring. This is a man's life. Dunn had pushed back against reporting that he was going, not our reporting, but others reporting that he was going to resign. He said he was going to serve until the election. He was not slated to run for re-election. But the idea that he had a terminal diagnosis is something that had been public, that Johnson said to a room of Republican donors and members and aides in outside of Miami a couple of weeks ago. So it's a very delicate situation. Neil Dunn is a workhorse member of Congress. He's not someone that you see on television a lot, but he's somebody who has who's been here for a while and is somebody who's well respected in the conference. And his health situation is obviously quite dire. And I don't think anyone expected, not least, certainly not me, but not least, Dunn and his staff probably and his family, that Trump would say something like this. So it's a quite delicate situation.
Yeah, and I think it's worth saying, Stuart, that is the politics of it, and you can't ignore the politics of it. But as Jake points out, this is a very human situation that someone who has served his country and served it for a very long time is facing potentially a life-threatening illness. And I just wonder what you make of that exchange between the president and the speaker.
You know, Republicans, back when I worked in the party, we used to say that character is destiny and character counts. And that's one of the things that Republicans were right about. Donald Trump is just the absolute worst person in the world. This is disgusting what he's done. He cares about nothing but what himself. He has this chaotic mind that bounces around from different things like some sort of old-fashioned pinball machine on tilt. And everything is how it relates to him. This is how toddlers relate to the world. So, you know, he gets some sort of impression and he responds to it. There's no thought. There's no empathy. There's no sense of decency. And look, you know, this affects the country because the president is more than just a chief executive. We used to say this all the time. This was said when Bill Clinton was going through these scandals, that he represents something that is bigger, that the country aspires to. And I just have to say, you know, I just got back from Ukraine, and you compare the leaders of these two countries and their character and what it means for the national identity of Ukraine to have a leader they can look up to with courage, and what it does to America to have this absolute, just horrible person as president of the United States. This is something that is not going to change rapidly. It's why you see these groups and Republicans, or these young Republicans that are up there with all this neo-Nazi, pro-Hitler stuff. This stuff sticks with us. And it's as soon as we can get beyond it. But I just asked my old Republicans I helped elect, really? Is this who you are? You can't speak out against this? And the answer consistently has been no, they can't. They're afraid to.
Jake, I think you can speak to the relationship between the president and Speaker Johnson. I think you and I were speaking just last week about how he has lasted longer than a lot of other speakers have, particularly in the Trump years. But here he is again, put in, let's call it an awkward situation of having to walk that very delicate line between wanting to respect someone who he knows and has worked with and obviously who's fighting for his life. And on the other hand, having to, in some ways, let the president know that this was something that was maybe beyond what was wanted to be talked about.
Well, it's hard to put that back in the box after the president says that, right? I mean, I don't think there's much that Johnson could do there. But they do share a very close relationship, Trump and the Speaker of the House, mostly because I think the Speaker of the House has executed or attempted to execute on most everything that Trump wants to do. And it's a different relationship than he had with the previous two Republican speakers, Kevin McCarthy and Paul Ryan, who had their own agenda, so to speak, and had their own viewpoint of the world. And I think Johnson takes the view that his job is to execute on behalf of the president. And if he has any disagreements or any divergence from the president's points of view, he's going to try to hash it out with him behind the scenes. And if that doesn't work, his priority is to execute on the president's agenda, not his own. That's the tack he has taken. We'll have to see where that leads them in November. But Johnson, took pains to a certain degree to not be so forward about the Neil Dunn situation, because this is somebody who is quite ill, obviously, and is according to reporting, according to what the leadership believes, and he did not mention I don't know if it's a fact, but the idea that he was not going to be around in June. That's not something that he had said, and there's not much that he could do about Trump saying it. So I mean, I guess that's how he handled the situation. I don't know how else you're supposed to handle it in that case.
Yeah, Trump said he would be dead by June, and Johnson says, okay, yeah, that wasn't public. Obviously, our thoughts are always with people who are going through terrible situations like that. We're with the congressman. We are with Susie Wiles, who got a diagnosis of breast cancer. It was made public earlier today, but in early stages, and so hopefully she has a full recovery. And on that note, I thank Laura Barone Lopez, Jake Sherman, and Stuart Stevens.